I'm going to talk about that a little bit. Seattle. Hi. Hi, Glenn. This is going to be super low key and not necessarily highly intelligent, but I just wanted to hop on here because tomorrow I'm going to do my Friday, breakdown 2 o'clock East Coast time. And I will be talking about this case out of Hilton Head, South Carolina. I don't know why I'm wearing headphones. I'm not listening to anything. Whatever. I'm keeping them on. I have been able to track down a lot of information with newspaper archives and yearbooks. Again, I got a membership to classmates.com, and they had all the yearbooks, and it was so much like what I was doing is I was taking every class from every year over like 5 years that I thought that the survivor would have been there, listing everybody by grade in a spreadsheet, and then making everything alphabetical and seeing where there were siblings, because I knew she had a certain amount of siblings of certain genders. And so I could start to see where there were families. This was a very tough case because it is, I don't know where you grew up, but I did not grow up in a very wealthy town. And so the idea of people like moving a lot, changing last names, jobs frequently is something that happens, but also very, very, very hard to track people down when that happens. Her mother moved a lot. So tomorrow, 2 o'clock, I'm going to be going over what I have found. I haven't found everything yet. I mean, and again, when I approach something like this, I approach it to either prove as much as I can prove about it, what is concrete, what exists, or show if something is not provable, like if I can't find it, not to say it's disproved, but that I just couldn't track it down, or show that it's disprovable. Like that is an option. I know when we hear a survivor story, we always, even though they're horrible, we always want to give every survivor the benefit of the doubt and prove that their story is true, right? Just because it gives credibility to all the survivor stories if one story is true. But that's not always the case. We have a very large trove of files. Some, again, I always mention there are FBI tips, or whatever you want to call them, people who called in saying they were in the room when Epstein was abusing people, and every other person in the room was like a Democratic senator, and it was Biden, and it was Obama, and it was every important Democrat you could think of, and no Republicans. And you look at that and you go, okay. And there's no follow-up. Nobody followed this up. So there are things in there that are obviously not credible. But there's a lot of credibility. And the thing with this case, and I want to talk about it now, but I have to wait till tomorrow. But again, not everybody gets to sit down with the FBI and talk about their story. That takes steps. Everybody likes my no effects. That takes steps, right? We don't all get to do that. And then once we do that, we don't usually get to do that 4 times. And she got to do that 4 times. So I have spent the last 3 days, with your help, thank you very much, finding the details around the case. So like all these little tiny minute details that she gave about time and place, and where her mother bought her house and how much it cost, and her mother's criminal history, and when they moved to town, and how old she was, and birth dates, and marriages, and moves. And I've been, for the last 3 days, just like tracking all that down and verifying that. And it was very, very, very hard to do because it's all pre-internet. So it's all, archives and microfiche and yearbooks, scans. And thank God we have internet, because like if it was truly pre-internet and I didn't have the internet to search this stuff down, it wouldn't all be in the same place. But we have a lot of really great background check websites. But the thing that we found out today that was actually quite difficult, I didn't think this was going to be as, but it was discovering who Jim Atkins is. And Jim Atkins is somebody who was a major player in these 302s, talked about him being in the room, him abusing. And the thing that sticks out for me with Jim Atkins is his name is mentioned in the Unknown Survivors Journal, which is from late 90s, early 2000s. Same name, but it's, I believe, listed as Mr. Atkins. Maybe it is Jim Atkins. I'll have to go back and look. Could be a different Jim Atkins. Could be, maybe. But it sticks in my mind that that's the same name. He was hard to track down as well because common name, but then you had these details about him being like a finance guy for a college or and specifically a for-profit school. So you had to like figure out what are the for-profit schools in Cincinnati, which is where they said he was out of. Um, And the for-profit school that he was with is not a school that's there now. So I'm digging through all these schools going, okay, what are the for-profit schools? They're none of the state schools. Those don't count. I'm looking at all the like regent boards and board of directors and all the faculty and, administrations. And he's just not anywhere. Like there's no Jim Atkins. Um, but he's listed. I mean, he is listed again. Credibility to the witness, he's listed as being the owner of the Harbor Homes Realty or whatever it's called, which is also, I believe, where her mother worked. I found her mother's history. The really cool thing about newspapers in the 1980s, and I remember this, I remember seeing this, I don't remember this, but I remember seeing this about my parents when they moved to our small town, is they used to do a thing, they had social pages. And in the social pages, when a new family moved to town, there would be a little blurb in your newspaper that said, Mr. and Mrs. So-and-so have just moved to town. They have this many children, and he will be working for so-and-so. In my dad's case, it was, he's going to be a middle school science teacher at the middle school, and he has a job and a contract, and they're looking for a home to rent, right? This is before I was born. And so that's something that they did. And so I was finally able to track down the survivor's mother by finding the blurb that, and the survivor too, and her family, finding the blurb of when they moved to town, which was right when she said they moved to town. And it said where her mother was going to work, which was the job she said her mother had. So now the key things that I'm looking for, I mean, they're the two major things. We've set the stage, all the details, and I feel badly for the survivor for a lot of reasons. But she knows that she has a shady past. She presented herself as being like, look, I'm a criminal. I've had a tough life. I've had addiction issues. I've had identity theft, things that she's done. And she's like, I don't want that to discredit my story. I'm going to tell you everything that I've done up front. I'm going to tell you my mother's history up front. And for me, it doesn't discredit a story because A, victims of sexual abuse have a much higher chance of having addiction issues and a criminal history in their life because they are traumatized. But also, like, we know that Epstein targeted girls who came from tough homes. And so that doesn't really throw me when I hear this story. That just kind of is par for the course. So now we have set the stage. We have all these like really specific details. We have Rick James's concert tour that lines up fairly well. She wasn't sure what age she went. She said he was in Savannah. He was doing a tour. Getting Waj's texts. She was doing a tour, or Rick James was doing a tour in 1982, which would be when she was 12 because she was born in 1970. And so maybe either she's misremembering that it wasn't in fact Savannah, Georgia, where she went to see him, which would have been when she was 12, but it was in fact when she said she did when she was 13, which would have been in Atlanta. So, I mean, she could have misremembered the location. He was on tour. He was in Georgia. He was close by. That also doesn't throw me. He was where she said he was at the age she said she was. And so, again, the stage is set. So here's the two things, and this is a team effort. This is what we all have to do. we need to find those records, those rental records, because this was not a place where Epstein bought a house. This was pre Palm Beach. This was pre Island. This was a place where he was renting. He was renting a vacation home. These are vacation home rentals for the wealthy. He wasn't uber wealthy like we knew him later in life. He was working his way up. I mean, he was probably a millionaire, but he wasn't like a half a billionaire at that point. He was very young. Um, Something interesting too that she mentioned was he was with a woman that she didn't think was his wife, but she was around, who was very cold. And that, when I hear cold and I hear a woman with Epstein, I automatically think of Ghislaine Maxwell. But this might have been during the time, I have to go back and look, when he would have been dating Eva Dubin. And that wouldn't have been Eva Dubin because she had blonde hair. But if you look at this time period and you look at what Ghislaine Maxwell said, this woman said, I don't think she was white necessarily, but I don't think she was like black or Hispanic. And if you look at her from that, like 1984, 1983, very dark tan skin and very long black hair and very like dark eyebrows, and she looked very European. And so, meaning, sorry, not European, that's vague, but she had darker skin and darker hair at that time. And it struck me because we know that he potentially knew her much, much earlier than is what's on the record as being 1991, which I think is obviously stupid because that's exactly when her father died, is right when Epstein met her, which is dumb. But if she's not coming off as being someone who is in partnership with him, she's not having a relationship with him, but she's always there and she's very cold. To me, that says Ghislaine Maxwell, but I don't know that. I don't know. But the thing that we have to find out, and the thing that I'm researching, and the thing that you can help me research, if you have any kind of like a access to newspaper archives, if you look up Elise, what? Okay, I don't know what that means. No effects. No effects. Yeah, I wear a lot of punk rock shirts. Sorry. If you look at these newspaper archives, and you look, I mean, they're fairly easy. The newspaper you want to be looking for is something called the Island Packet. That was the newspaper that was writing about realty and all their little real estate blurbs at the time. And you can put in sort of like a year. I usually do 84 to 86. I usually use that as my time frame. What we're looking for is realtors who worked with her mother. And I can't give out her mother's name. I can't give out her name out of respect for her being a Jane Doe. But I have found the realtors that worked with her mother. There was one that came to town at the exact same time as her mother came to town. And looking to see if there's any kind of documentation that still exists that would show that a man named Jeff, because I don't know if he used his real name, if a man named Jeff rented a vacation home on the property, which is a very big property, and then it went through a huge fraud scenario like 2 years later, which, sets off little bells and whistles in my head, because that was a thing that Epstein did, is he was involved in these sort of Ponzi scheme frauds, and then he never attached himself to them, took off, and then people went to jail for it. He did that multiple times and was very proud of it and bragged about it in like newspapers and magazines, which is what it is. But we need to find some sort of credible account that shows that he would have been renting a vacation home during that time. He also stayed at the Marriott. And then we need to, once we have that, if we can find that, we need to have some kind of a credible account. We need flight logs, which I don't think he would have had a plane that early. We need to figure out if she went back to New York. She was from New York originally. She was born in New York. And my guess is that was, although they didn't have like the traditional family that you or I would have necessarily. Sorry, I shouldn't make assumptions about everybody, but we think about like, how could a mother let her child go to New York with a man? I don't know that scenario, but I do know that she was originally from there, so that could have been an excuse that was used. But if we can show that she actually went to New York in some way, that would be really helpful. So those are two things. We need to show that he rented, and we need to show that she traveled to New York. Everything else that she has said, everything that has been in the newspaper articles recently out of the Post and Courier, if you have access to their articles, they deserve a Pulitzer, award-winning journalism at its finest, small town newspaper doing incredible work. But every other thing that she has said in all of her depositions, which she was very resistant to say, which also to me gives her credibility, is that everything else has been true, like to the letter, lined up years, numbers, housing deeds, arrest records, everything has completely lined up. And I've saved everything just to make sure that I have it. So we need to figure out if he was there, and it's very difficult. And I'm finding ads, like there was lots of little newspaper ads, because I was hoping the way this started was she made a flyer to babysit. Her mom wanted her to babysit. I have not talked to Jennifer Rubin. I haven't. And so I was hoping there might be something that would show maybe like a little newspaper ad, because they did that more back then. They used newspaper ads way more, obviously. But there is this newspaper ad that I keep seeing over and over again. And again, the 38,000 people on the island, so it could be anybody. But there's this one where a guy is trying to rent out his 2-bedroom, and he keeps saying, "Call Jeff, call Jeff, call Jeff." And she knew him as Jeff. And so I don't, it's a shot in the dark. Lots of Jeffs, I'm sure. But I saved that if there's any way to track down. It's hard to track down people's phone numbers from the 1980s, believe it or not. Okay. So that's all. Can you tell that I don't prepare ahead of time? I'm going to give an hour-long discussion on this tomorrow that I also am preparing nothing for. It will just be talking, and we'll go over some of that tomorrow, and maybe something will come up between now and then. But this is the most research I've ever done in my life, and thank God I'm a kid from the 90s who had to do this kind of thing, sort of, definitely not to this extent, but this is how we all learned to research our papers in high school. Yeah. So it's not easy, but I'm not going to give up. But it's also, again, it's a giant puzzle, and puzzles are good, and it's fantastic group effort. So okay, that's all. Thanks for hanging in there with me tonight, guys, in my pajamas, and I hope you have a lovely Thursday night. Get your sleep, and we'll do all this again in the morning. Talk later. Bye.